Roger, I made $7,000 last year. I have to pay taxes on this? That was my buddy Bob who called me up a few years ago. He had started this online side hustle business. He was taking registrations for Little League tournaments or something like that. And it turned out to be fairly profitable for him. And it wasn't until April 14th that he figured out that he was going to have to pay taxes on the money that he had earned from that. And yeah, he was a bit panicky. The only thing I could suggest is he contact my tax person and maybe she could help him. But it wasn't looking really good for the home team there. Hello, my name's Roger Kugler. This is Working at Woodworking Podcast, episode number 65. It's a new year. So Bob kind of illustrates why you don't wait till the last minute to do your taxes. Last year at this time, I did an episode on filing your taxes, not waiting until April to do so. And I'm just going to reiterate that again because I know some of you out there are going to do this and you're going to pay for it. So what taxes do we start off with? For me, it's sales tax. I live in the state of Indiana and our sales tax deadline is the end of January. Now, I pay sales tax annually. There are some people who pay sales tax quarterly. There are some who pay it monthly. But since my sales tax collection is so low, I only have to do it once a year. Now, when I say pay sales tax, the word actually should be remit sales tax because the customer is the one who is actually paying the tax. We as the business collect the tax and then remit that to the state. I mean, come on, we're all paying sales tax as either a business consumer or as a private citizen. When I buy cardboard boxes to ship my product, I have to pay sales tax on the cardboard boxes because the cardboard boxes are not part of the actual product. If I buy cleaning products to clean the shop, that gets charged sales tax. So what I'm talking about here is the sales tax that customers pay that I have to remit to the state. If you're unfamiliar with how this works, maybe you're in a state that doesn't have a sales tax, Tennessee, or you haven't quite gotten off the ground yet and you're a little fuzzy on how all of this works. Here's a real quick synopsis. If somebody walks into my shop and buys a product, they pay sales tax. I have to charge the tax, and then at the end of the January the following year, I have to remit that money to the state. If somebody orders a product online to be shipped in the state, I have to collect sales tax. If somebody orders a product to be shipped outside of the state, no sales tax. If someone orders a product on Etsy to be shipped inside the state, sales tax. If someone orders a product on Etsy to be shipped outside of the state, sales tax. Easy, right? Okay. Basically, if you have a presence in the state of Indiana, you're in my shop, you live in Indiana, you're expected to pay sales tax. If you live outside of the state and you go to my website and order a product and I ship it to you out of the state, there's no sales tax. But if you order it on Etsy or Amazon or any of the other online platforms, you have to pay sales tax? Yes, you do. This gets down to that thing called nexus, and we've talked about this before. Does a company have nexus in the state? And in the previous discussion, we talked about how the courts have ruled that if you are a big business, which they define, I believe it's $100,000 or over, and so many transactions, you are considered a big business, and you have to collect sales tax from every customer irregardless of where they live. Etsy, based in New York City, giant corporation. They have to collect sales tax on every single one of the transactions that go through their network. Fortunately, they do all of this. They keep track of my sales and where people are from when they buy something from me. So if someone from California orders a product, Etsy knows what the tax rate is in California. Well, their county, their city, even the frickin' neighborhood where they live, because California's crazy. They collect that sales tax and remit it back to California. Thank God. So this is kind of a curse and a blessing all at once. It's a blessing that I don't have to mess with this, because if I had to keep track of all of the sales tax jurisdictions in California and somebody ordered something off my website, well, quite honestly, I would be out of business. That would just be a Herculean task for a one-person shop, and it would just not function. But it's also kind of screws the customer of California when they order via a company in New York City to buy something from a one-person shop in Indiana. They have to pay the California sales tax. Yep. Welcome to it. Now, if that person from California goes onto my website and orders that exact same product, they're not paying any sales tax. What? How does that work? Well, remember that $100,000 thing? I'm not over $100,000. And my guess is there might be a whole bunch of companies out there that they make sales right up to $100,000 and then form a new company, split something off. So one person could own, 10 different companies, each making $99,000 a year, so that they're flying under the $100,000 cap. I don't know that for sure, but if you set out a set of rules, people will figure out how to get around those rules. Human nature. So take a deep breath. If you're a small business, you're not making over $100,000. And I think it's 200 transactions. That may not be right. Maybe it's 20,000 transactions. I forget exactly. But, if you're small time, not going to have to worry about this. I have to collect sales tax for any person in my shop or any shipments inside the state of Indiana. Only thing I personally have to worry about, Etsy takes care of all the other stuff. So what actually is taxed? Again, this is going to be your individual state, country, tax unit, whatever. For me, if it's something that a person can come into the shop and pick up and carry out, 9 times out of the 10, it is a taxable item. If I make something, all the materials that go into that are tax exempt. I don't have to pay tax on the lumber that I bought, the sales tax. I don't have to pay sales tax on the finish that I use or the fasteners that I use, but I do have to collect sales tax on the actual product. Now, if it's something where I'm going into someone's home and I'm building something there, generally speaking, that's not taxable because that's considered construction. And if you go to the lumber yard and you buy some materials and you go into someone's home, you're not paying sales tax on that product. But I do have to pay sales tax at the lumber yard on the lumber that I'm buying. So they're going to tax you either before or after. And it just kind of depends, your state, your jurisdiction. Talk to a tax professional. Now for me, the end of January, no big deal. I just open up my spreadsheet and, click here, click there, look down here at the bottom. Oh, that's the amount of sales tax I have to pay. Sure, no problem. Log on to the state website, enter the amount, draft it from my account. Yeah, easy peasy. No, I wish I could say it was that easy, but I very much probably like you, I've got to dig through bank statements and figure out what this payment was for and attributed it to that sale. And was that in state? Was that out of state? Oh, geez, was a person, I got to go through all this. I really wish I was better. But this is a classic example of do as I say, not as I do, because January is an ugly month for me. I mean, I've got to go through and kick myself for not doing this monthly or even quarterly. Oh my gosh, if I did this semi-annually, I would be so much further ahead, but I'm not. I'm horrible at this. So do as I say, not as I do. So after you get your sales tax wrapped up, now you're going to have to go to your income tax. And by the way, if you live in a state that doesn't have a sales tax, piss off. So income tax, that's the next thing we have to get on to. Just like my buddy Bob, he waited until April 14th. Taxes are due the 15th of most years, and he was in full-blown panic. The biggest thing he was panicked over was that he really had no expenses. And I found out later that he had talked to the My Tax person, and she had filed an extension form that gave him till like August to get everything done. And they went through and he figured out that he actually had bought a printer for the quote unquote business that he realized that he was actually forming. And there were some other expenses that he was able to attribute to it. And she even pointed out mileage and percent of his home that was devoted to office space to run this business, and was able to generate some expenses that reduced his overall tax liability. But don't wait until the last minute to do this. So if you've been doing some woodworking, selling some woodworking, I hope you've been keeping track of it. If you sold, I don't know, let's say you sold $1,200 worth of cutting boards and you haven't really kept track of anything. Yeah, some of them were your wife sold these at work. There was a bake sale that you sold some at, and there was a little craft show at the church, and you went through about $1,200. Good for you. Excellent for you. You can do this super simple and enter $1,200 on line 1H of the 1040 tax return for the year 2022 and pay taxes on that $1,200. Nothing wrong with that, except you're giving the government more money than rightfully by law what they're entitled to. Hey, you want to do that? Go right ahead. Easy peasy, simple. Or if you've been keeping track of your lumber expense for last year and maybe some of the materials that you've been using, these are legitimate business expenses that you endured to produce a product for sale. Those are deductible from your overall profit. Remember, profit is sales minus expenses. I'm sure you've probably bought some sandpaper last year in the production of those cutting boards. Tax deductible. And Lord help you, I pray that you were smart enough to keep track of everything in a separate bank account. Okay, $1,200, maybe you didn't have a separate bank account. And it's not going to be that hard to go back through and figure out, you were at this lumber yard and you bought this material, okay, and then you guys went to Disneyland, and then you bought, some finished product at this retail store, and okay, I remember doing that. You can break this out because, it's $1,200. How much money are you really going to have racked up here? You can figure that out. This year, you need to open a bank account and keep this stuff separate. It's just going to make life so much easier, and the benevolent overlords at the IRS will smile kindly upon you. Now, is it possible that you could have business expenses greater than your sales volume? Yes, absolutely. That's called losing money, and it happens in business all the time. The guy that brags, I made $1 million woodworking last year. Wow, good for you. The thing he didn't tell you is that he spent $1.3 million making that $1 million. So the number is only a number until it's compared to some other number, and then we can figure out if it's a good number or not. And so, yeah, it's very possible that if you are running this as a business, which I hope you are, that you will not have a profitable year your first year, second year, third year. My understanding is that the IRS doesn't really peak an eyebrow until about the fifth year, that if you're not making a profit by then, okay, this is looking a little fishy here. And my theory is that that's why, 92% of businesses fail within the first 5 years. Yeah, these are professional tax dodgers who come up with some business idea to dump a bunch of money through, and so that they don't have to pay taxes. And, not a huge fan. It sounds like a whole bunch of work for, very little return. Now, you might be one of the fortunate individuals that receive a little notice from the IRS. Or if you're using software, it'll actually print this out at the end of, filing your taxes that you have incurred a penalty because you hadn't properly filed quarterly returns. And this really confused me for a while because I had always worked for other businesses, and whenever I started on my own, first time this happened, I was waiting for the black cars to pull out up in front and the, helicopters overhead, and they were taking me off to jail, and, I'd never see my family again, let alone do any woodworking. But it's not nearly that traumatic. It was simply that I had actually generated a profit that year, and I hadn't paid any taxes on that profit. So at the end of the year, at, tax filing, I wrote a really big check to the IRS, which is what I was anticipating doing, and I had the money, backed up, and it wasn't a problem at all, except the IRS complained that I really should have been making payments all along because they don't like to receive a big check all in one big lump sum like that. They want this kind of spread out throughout the year. Yeah, makes sense. You're more likely to be able to make 4 smaller payments than you are one great big payment. And so that's the idea of quarterly tax payments. And there was a small penalties, 10% or something like that. It wasn't much. But just the idea that, the IRS is coming down on you, that's more stressful than what the thing actually is. Chill out. Don't worry about this. Big deal. You got a penalty. Obviously, you've never played sports. So if you're having to make quarterly tax payments, great for you. Now, big change for 2023. Remember last year about this time, I was telling you with doom and gloom in my voice about the upcoming IRS Form 1099-K, and any transaction that goes through a third-party processor, PayPal, Etsy, Venmo, Square, Squarespace, Shopify, on and on and on. Any transaction over $600, you are going to get a Form 1099-K from that entity, and they were also going to tell the IRS that you got a payment over $600. And you are going to have to make sure that you declared that on your tax return, or really bad things like people in black cars pulling up in front of your house and helicopters, was going to happen to you. Well, never mind. Yes, that's right. On December 23rd, 2022, the IRS announced that to help smooth the transition and ensure clarity for taxpayers, tax professionals, and industry, the IRS will delay implementation of the 1099-K changes, said Doug O'Donnell, acting IRS commissioner. Okie dokie. I did a little bit more digging, and at first there was nothing about this on the Great Ethernet. Now there's been a few articles that have popped up. I've included a link to a website that talks a little bit more in depth about this, why they were doing this. It basically kind of sounds like all of the tax professionals in the U.S. kind of knocked on the IRS door and said, you're just about ready to get a crap storm, headed your way. We're not prepared for this. Pretty sure you're not prepared for this, and maybe you want to back off. So there you go. You don't have to worry about that this year. They're still planning on doing this in 2024. Any transactions in 2023, this year, they're expecting to go through with it. So, we'll just wait and see kind of what happens. So good luck with those taxes. Get her done. Don't wait until April. So other tasks that you have at the start of a new year, you need to raise your prices. Boom. Just said it. Why? Because don't be one of those people, like myself, who went like maybe 8 years, 10 years, then never raised prices on some products. That's just not good. And then something might happen where economic system gets all upset and you reevaluate things as material costs are going through the roof. And it's like, I need to raise my prices. And then you do the math and you figure out, holy crap, I've got to raise prices. And I had one product line that's virtually disappeared because I had not ratcheted up prices the way I should have been doing. And now when there's like a 300% price increase, a lot of customers just said, nope, no way. And that product's, I'm not going to say it's dead, but it's definitely on the way out, I fear. So raise your prices. And that means your shop rate, whatever you're charging, that needs to go up. Inflation is going up. And how would you like to rent a house? Let's say it's $500 a month, and you've been there for 10 years. And the landlord comes in and says, I really hate to do this, but I've got to raise the rent. Oh, well, you've been really good about this. How much do you think it'll be? Well, it'll be $1,800 a month. That destroys your world. I mean, that's just not doable. So make these small incremental changes in your business every year so that you don't get hit with something like this. And plus, you're probably not paying attention to the numbers and you're either losing money on some products or leaving money on the table with some products. So, increase your shop rate. Figure out what your local mechanic is charging, what your plumber is charging, and that will give you some idea of what's going on. You can find out what other professionals in your area is charging. Carpenters, trim carpenters, see what their hourly rate is, and do this. Don't just put this off. And you need to evaluate your overall operation for the year 2022. Did you make money? Were you having fun? If you weren't having fun making money for yourself, working 80 hours a week, you might as well find somebody to work for only 40 hours a week and not have any fun doing that. Because if you're working this hard, I really hope you're having some fun doing it. But when you get your taxes done, this is the other reason I really encourage you to get the taxes done early. The taxes will kind of tell you what's working, what's not working. And you can make changes, in maybe February or March as opposed to May or June. And when you get done, kind of commit to cut 10% out of your workflow. If there's a product that's not really doing all that great, maybe you don't really enjoy making it, cut it. Because when you cut something that's not working terribly well, you are opening up areas for something else to work well. I'm a real firm believer on bandwidth. I mean, we as humans only have a certain bandwidth, especially when we're working solo, when we're working by ourselves. My ambition far outstrips my capacity to produce. You probably suffer from that too. Some things you just need to let go of, because then an idea will float in that you're excited about, you really want to do this, and it just kind of gives more life, more vitality to the business that you're working on. So come up with some new plans, some new goals, refresh. You've got a brand new start here. And maybe if you've been listening to this podcast for a while and you actually haven't pulled the trigger and started this, maybe the only thing you really need to say is, I'm going to do this year. Put those words out into the great cosmos. Say it out loud. I'm going to do this year. Now, I would not expect, nor I think anyone else would expect you to break ground on a new 100,000 square foot facility with all the latest and greatest European woodworking equipment in it. No, it doesn't have to be anything like that. In fact, I hope it's not anything like that. Probably lose your shirt. I'm talking about saying, yes, I'm going to open a bank account. I'm going to start keeping track of this stuff. And whenever, Mrs. Smith, comes in and needs that rocking chair repaired, you can bill her as a business. You can buy materials as a business. This isn't rocket science. It's not that hard. You just need to have a little bit of organization behind it. And you just need to do it. I received an email from Pat Flynn. He's a podcaster, YouTuber, a entrepreneur, been in the market for decades, really. And I've gained a lot of really great information from him. And this email, it was a broadcast email. And the gist of it was, you do you. When we start comparing ourselves to other people, maybe it's some goober on YouTube, maybe it's some goober, on a podcast. We start comparing ourselves. We start to go down kind of a slippery slope that is really unfair, both to you and to whoever you're comparing to. Different situations, different lifestyles. So to compare an apple to a whole orchard that's self-defeating. Don't do that. You do you. You compare your production with what you think you are capable of. The only measure that really matters. Can I do better today than I did yesterday? I had a really great day today. I hope tomorrow is as good. You do you. So recommendations, couple links there about the tax thing. Missed jobs. I had a lady call me, and I could tell there was a bit of desperation in her voice. She had bought some cabinets online. Didn't mention the name. I didn't ask. But she said that the cabinet doors have a different color finish in some places on them. She said the color and the finish was just messed up. And she had talked to the company, and the company said there's really nothing we can do to fix that. Why don't you find someone local who will be able to make the repair, and we will give you an allowance for that hopefully will cover it. Well, that sucks. That just really sucks. You're buying something from an online company or even an in-town company, a local company, and they're not going to stand behind their product? Excuse me? And so I kind of encouraged her to go back and talk to the manager of the customer service, or if that didn't get any place, asked to, on a different phone call, asked to speak to the marketing manager. Salespeople absolutely hate when customer service screws up all their hard work. And, don't take no for an answer. They should honor this. They should be able to fix this. And if they can't, they can send her a brand new set of cabinets. That was not something I wanted to get involved in, because number one, when you're trying to match somebody else's work, that gets really, really difficult. You don't know what type of products they use. You don't know what type of schedule they used, and it can just not turn out well for you. So that was a job that I tried to support the caller, but I ran away screaming like a little girl because I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. So special thanks to listeners in Minneapolis, Minnesota, USA, and also to Steenwijk, Netherlands. And I have to give a huge thank you to Dan. Dan, you literally made my year. Thank you so much for your support. As always, check out the show notes for some affiliate links in there. And if you have questions about your business or starting your business, please email them. You can shoot me an email at roger@workingatwoodworking.com, and my phone number is in the show notes. I must say that I do talk faster than I type. So, love to hear from you, and until next episode, happy woodworking.